it's not a very obviously an architecture centric project. It's more around like community based engagement, and creating livelihood at a grassroots level. So that's the kind of work that we are mostly engaged in. So quickly, before I go into the kind of work that we're doing, let me just tell you the place where I am from. I'm from a place called Kargil, which a lot of people may have heard of, and mostly we associate the Kargil, with the 1999 war. So that is the first thing that sort of comes to mind. But a lot of people don't know that Kargil it served as a very important trade center during the time of the Silk Route, especially during the late 19th and the early 20th century. Because of its strategic location where it is located even today, a lot of people who must have visited Ladakh or crossed through Kargil, it's right at the intersection, sort of equidistant from Leh on one side, Srinagar on the other, which is Kashmir, and then Zanskar on the other side, and then Skardu, Gilgit, Baltistan, which is in Pakistan right now. So these were the main key feeder routes into Central Asia. So Kargil was at the center point. So that's how Kargil sort of became a very strategically important place. And because of that, lot of intermingling of different cultures at that time, because people from different parts of the Himalayas used to come and stay here and do trade here. We have today about 6 different ethnic groups living in Kargil today. And it is basically a trans-Himalayan region, which means that it's at the intersection of the Karakoram and the lower Himalayas and the higher Himalayas. So it has its own sort of microclimate. It's not very arid like how you have in Leh in the eastern part of Ladakh, but here we enjoy a more moderate sort of climate. So that's a bit of a background on Kargil. This is a photograph of the old Caravan Bazaar in Kargil, and there's a photograph next to it, which is in 2018. Obviously, most of the architecture, all the built heritage has gone, unfortunately, and not a lot of conservation work has been done on that. But still, if you take a walk through this market, you will still get a sense of that, how the vibe would have been 70, 80 years back. This is how the town looks today. This is a picture of the summer, and amidst all this brown, we have a few spells of green, which we enjoy for a few weeks in the summer. So these are some pictures of Kargil just to give you a feel of the place, because when you say Ladakh, you just picture like brown mountains. So I just wanted to give you an idea as to the different scenes of Kargil at different times of the year. So this is the apricot bloom on top. Then you have autumn, and then this is in the springtime. We have the wild tulips in bloom below in yellow, and that's the famous Nun and Kun peaks, which are the highest peaks of the Ladakh Himalayas, which is in the Suru Valley of Kargil. That's a picture of it in January. And then, yeah, she already spoke about what Root Ladakh is, but just to quickly tell you, we started Root Ladakh, me and my younger brother. We worked in Delhi for a bit, and then decided to move back. And honestly, when we started this, the idea was to figure out how to fit ourselves when we come back home, because what we were doing, studying management and design, we didn't really see ourselves finding any job here. So we had to figure out a way to make a living. So that's how it sort of came together. At heart, we are a outdoor travel company, so we love the outdoors. We have a good team of locals where we every year we organize different outdoor trips. But we also believe that it is very important to create sort of shared value where you're working in. So that's how the social impact angle comes into it. So we are involved in a lot of social impact projects as well that we do throughout the year. Uh, we believe that when we do a lot of travel-based experiences for a place like Kargil, I think it was the best way to change that preconceived notion of Kargil to the outsider. Like I mentioned before, that when you talk about Kargil, people, they generally associate it with the war. So, that's our idea, and our aim and our mission is to basically let people look beyond that image of Kargil as a war. And these sort of travel-based experiences, we feel are one of the best ways to do that, change that notion, and at the same time try and create some livelihood at the grassroots as well. So most of our work is surrounding that. So this is some of the images that of the outdoor activities that we do during different times of the year. So which involves like wildlife sightings and treks and water-based activities and climbing and things like that. These are the different activities that we do as a for-profit organization, which makes money and helps us sustain rest of the projects that we do. Um, this is quickly. I'll just talk about the two projects and then I'll go detail into the Azbail project. So Unlock Hundarman was one of the first projects that we did. It was like an experimental project that we did, a community engagement project in a village called Hundarman, which is right on the line of control between India and Pakistan. It's just half an hour from the town of Kargil. It's a partially abandoned settlement which we discovered back in 2014. And the initial idea was to do the architectural documentation of this place. So uh, obviously I don't have architectural background, but we do keep visiting different places, different villages in Kargil, trying to explore the different opportunities and things that we can do which can help the community, and as well as some sort of travel experiences that we can create. So that's how we end up discovering these places, and based on discussions with different friends who are architects or who are from that background, we Hundarman happened to be a project where we did the architectural documentation of the place. And then in 2014, we ended up setting up a cultural museum in this village, which is now one of the main, the key sites of attraction, so to speak, for tourists to visit when they visit Kargil. And it's a completely community-run project. The museum is run by some of the people in the community, and then we try to do some home extensions. And even the project's Bayul has evolved from this similar idea, but Unlock Hundarman had some issues. We made some mistakes there, and we had a lot of learnings, which we then tried to apply in the subsequent projects that we did. But nonetheless, it still had some good success. This project has gained us also some recognition, and Kargil as a place as well. So was one of the first projects that we did there. Then the another project that we do, it's around wildlife conservation. So this is mainly around Himalayan brown bears, which is endemic to Kargil region. A lot of people don't know the existence of these bears in these areas. It's a very rare species of brown bears found only in this part of the world, and there's a lot of conflict between humans and Himalayan brown bears in and around villages in Kargil. And us, we organize a lot of wildlife tours around Himalayan brown bears. So we are engaged with the community constantly. So we started a project called Project DRENMO, where we are trying to engage the local community, where we have our objective is three-pronged. One is to do a lot of awareness and education among the youth and school children, which we conduct workshops every year. And we do a lot of capacity building and training of the youth. That is our second objective, wherein we train them around wildlife guiding, and we have built a small community of local youth who help us in doing all the groundwork there. And then the third is to do a lot of policy and decision making influencing at a government level. So we keep doing a lot of meetings and conferences with different stakeholders in the community, including the government. And we create reports, we do research, and then help them create a more conducive environment basically for the wildlife and the humans to exist in the same space. So and this is the project that we do around wildlife conservation. And now to talk about, I want to come to the projects Bible that we sort of did the to do much there. Uh, this is a project which is again similar to Hundarman. But just to give you a bit of a story about this village called Hinasco and why we chose Hinasco, is that Hinasco is supposed to be a small chiefdom on the Leh Kargil National Highway, which was a fort was established in the 1700 because it was on the Silk Route. It became a very strategic place for it to have a fortification in that place. So when everybody who was traveling on that route, because they were prone to a lot of raids and things like that. So that's why the then ruler of Ladakh had established a fortification here to guard the area. So that's how the settlement has come about. There is a local legend there known as Lonpo Rikpachan, who is supposedly was a very wise child who was born in Ladakh, very close to Hinasco. And once in from Tibet, somebody prophesied about this kid, that that this kid has born in this particular village. So then they send somebody from Tibet to pick him up, and he was supposed to bring him back to Tibet. So while on his journey back to Tibet, these two people had a conversation, and then Lunpo Rikpachan, when the guy who came to pick him up asked Lunpo Rikpachan about the fate of this village, he said that this village is so, and there's a local lore. In the English translation, he basically says that this is going to be a village which is going to face. It's not that they're going to starve, but they're going to face a lot of hardships in their life. For everything that they have to do, they have to struggle really hard. And this is a philosophy that is so ingrained in them, that they truly believe this, that they have to really work hard. So these people, the people who are settled in Hinasco today, are but very hardworking people, and they mostly work in the fields and things like that. So the story that sort of attracted us kind of led to this project Bayul, where we thought that it has a very interesting story, and it has, when we started exploring the village, we found that there's a lot of rich heritage there, not just cultural heritage in terms of built heritage or intangible folklore and things like that, but also natural heritage. Also, we found a lot, like for example wildlife, and hiking routes and mountains and things like that. So it kind of felt that there is something that we can do in this village, and that's how in 2017 we partnered up with another company called Little Local. It's a responsible travel company based in Bombay, and together we have sort of adopted this project, and we've been working on this since 2017. And our main objective here is again to document the lesser known heritage of Kargil, and that's one of our key objectives, because there's a risk of losing this cultural and natural heritage, because a lot of the oral history which is there is being passed on obviously orally, so that this is not documented. So as and when the new generations are coming, people who are not living in the village are not able to this knowledge is being not transitioned. So one of our objectives was to document this the losing culture and heritage of the place. And the second objective was to again create some sort of alternate livelihood in this place, because most of the people who are here, which are old people, are dependent on the little agricultural work that they do when the season of agriculture is very very small, just 2 3 months here because of the climate. And a lot of the younger lot are either not, they are not staying in the village because they are doing some small government job, or they're being employed by the local army and things like that. So we our idea was that if we are able to create some alternate source of livelihood within the village, it can help them have a better life. Because most of the younger people are not in the village, and the people who are living in the village are mostly elderly, above 50 or 60 years of age. So we've been trying to work on this project, and we've been doing this by way of a particular model that we have tried since Hundarman, organizing these travel based workshops and curated tours. So in the last 3 years we have conducted 2 3 workshops, and also smaller trips to the village with smaller teams. And what we have done is that over this time we have tried to build that rapport with the village, and then work on the different ideas that they give us to sort of create that kind of a system of livelihood generation. So I just want to play this quick film because this will save me a lot of talking. This is the video that we made on the project by last year after we finished our last year's project, last year's workshop. So this will kind of give you an idea of what we have done so far, and then we can move on into a bit of more detail. We're in Naftu village in Karnal district of Ladakh, and we are here with about 35 students from Tamil school STEP, and we are trying to build like a cultural integration center here, which is basically intended towards promoting ecotourism and responsible tourism. It's a 1 week long, very intensive, hands-on kind of a project, and we are now 4 days into the project, and everything, as you can see, is like in full force. All the teams are working on different aspects. Somebody is working on the installation, somebody is working on the narrative, somebody is working on graphics, somebody is working on the space design. So we have about 10 separate volunteers besides the 35 participants. So we are hoping to open it in the next 2 days, and we have a lot of important people coming to open the exhibit. So yeah, really excited, but also at the same time a bit anxious. I'm really hopeful that we are able to pull this off, and something that can really help the community here in terms of creating a source of alternative livelihood.
So I heard about Little Locals project in Henasco last year, and I couldn't make it last year, but I really wanted to be part of it because I liked what they were doing here. It's very difficult to find villages in a commercial tourist spot or a tourist area like Kargil or Leh that very few people know about, and Henasco is one of them. And it's secluded, there's no network, the locals are so warm, the food's so good, so that's why I like being here.
Hey guys, I'm Rahul. So I'm basically an architecture student. So my interests go and travel and architecture. So the main reason I came to Leh was mainly to travel and also study about the life of the locals here, how they survive, and also the types of construction they do. So basically, this project was a mystery for me. So when I came here 5 days back, so this, like you can see here, this particular village was called in this land. Even I believed, like I couldn't see anything what is there behind it. And now I was studying about the building behind me, and also looking into how to check the potential of the village you can grow up to, and also what can we do for the tourism development of the village and betterment of the village itself.
My name is Amidst. I'm from Hussain, and I'm a BA student. Now I'm studying in Jammu, class 2 University of Jammu. And मुझे यहाँ पर मतलब पिछले मतलब 2-3 साल से एक ग्रुप आके यहाँ पर यूनिवर्सिटी में डेवलपमेंट की काम कर रही है। यहाँ पर वो लोग मतलब एक म्यूजियम खोलने की वो लोग एक काम कर रही है, वो मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगा। मतलब मैं एक वॉलंटियर की तरह काम कर रही हूँ, जो मेरे लिए बिग अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ है कि मैं अपना मतलब अपने विलेज के लिए मतलब कुछ कर सकूँ।
तो यहाँ पे उन्होंने एक्चुअली क्या किया है, विलेज में एक सेल्फ हेल्प ग्रुप है जो हैंडीक्राफ्ट का काम करते हैं। ये सारे प्रोडक्ट उन्होंने ही बनाए हैं। तो ये हम सोच रहे हैं छोटा सा शॉप भी हो सकता है, शॉप भी हो सकता है, और थोड़ा सा आएंगे तो यहाँ से शॉपिंग भी कर सकते हैं, आना चाहिए। एंड सर इफ यू सी द दैट ये नया पुलिस I'm here to share my experience of past few days. I hope I'm representing you all. So here it is. Now we the enthusiasm of all of us was at peak, and that enthusiasm has sustained till this very moment. You can see it all.
Muzzamil, your video screen.
My internet got disconnected, guys. Sorry.
Okay. No problem.
Henasco is ready to offer that experience with the homestays, the traditional Ladakhi life, community-driven museum, as well as adventure. Past few days,
Every day was challenging, every day was tiring, but every day was creating, and more than that, every day was fun.
इस इलाके में खासकर हमारे हिना स्कूल जो कि एक छोटा सा गांव है और बहुत प्यारा गांव है, इसके लिए आपने इतना अच्छा काम किया। हमारे हिंदुस्तान से यूनिवर्सिटी से आए हुए स्टूडेंट्स, आप लोगों के लिए भी एक अच्छा मौका मिला हमारे करगिल को देखने का और इसी के साथ हिना स्कूल में इस तरह की कंट्रीब्यूशन देने का। जो जिस तरीके से मुज़म्मिल साहब ने जो काम कर रहे हैं यहाँ पर कि अपना कीमती वक्त और अपना भरपूर हिमायत जो भी इनसे हो सकता है वो अपने खर्चे से वो इस तरह के काम कर रहे हैं, खासकर टूरिज्म के लिए। ये वाकई काबिल तारीफ है।
Guys, sorry for the internet connection. It's just another day for us here in Kargil. It's not very reliable, so sorry about that. I hope the audio was audible to everybody. So, like you saw in this film, this was one of our most recent interventions. So, before this, in 2017 and 18, basically we conducted little smaller recce's and workshops, which was not as big as scale in this one, but the objective of those two workshops were to delve a little bit more deeper into the history of the place, a bit of the culture of the place, and engage with the community through just casual conversations and living with them. And these were people who accompanied people who accompanied us were like basically architects and artists and researchers and general travelers who are who want to experience something offbeat. So that model was a bit more semi-structured, so to speak, and with very loosely defined goals. But that helped us in gaining some more information about the place, and at the same time get an understanding of what we need to do. So before jumping into a big decision like this of setting up a cultural interpretation center in a building, we decided that based on our previous experiences of other projects, we decided that we will do it slowly. We will take more time and basically let the community themselves sort of tell us what they want rather than us imposing our ideas on them. That has been sort of our approach for Zbayul. And Zbayul actually is the historical name of Inasco, which literally means the hidden village. Zba means hidden and Yul means village or a place, because it's literally hidden behind a big gorge. So you can't see this village from the road. You have to go through the gorge to, and it suddenly just opens up in front of you. So that's a sort of an experience in itself. So that's how we ended up naming this project as Project Zbayul. In the first 2 years, 2017 and 18, after and besides documenting the local history and culture and some of the folklore, we also ended up making a small installation out of rammed earth right on the highway. Because since this village is hidden, we thought that this would be a good idea. Because it's a national highway. It's a very busy highway. And in this picture below, as you can see, in the back you see the lone paws on top, and there's the gorge through which you enter the village. So we have sort of placed this very strategically here so that travelers or people who are tourists who are flying on this road can stop here and check out the Lumpa house. So that, that small hole is like a peeping hole. So if you look through it, you have a the Lumpa house in the fort is in view. So it's sort of a very nice and simple, interesting installation that we ended up making there. And then in 2018 was when we collaborated with SEPT, and then we had this about 35 students where they lived in the village for about 7 days and worked with a lot of volunteers, and they worked on different aspects of the project, and eventually ended up setting up this cultural interpretation center. Of course, the outcome after 3 years, it's a very short span of time. So we realized that the objectives that we have set of creating a lot of livelihood locally and documenting all the cultural and architectural heritage of the place, it's obviously it's going to take a lot of time and effort because it's a very complex challenge. But in the 3 years, what we have managed to achieve is that setting up of this tangible cultural heritage museum, which is now like a repository of artifacts and sketches, the folklore and stories and photographs and such, which is a good cultural repository, not just for outsiders but also for the younger generation who is in the village. So it gives them a very good sense of their roots, of their past and of their ancestors. And then beyond this, then we have done a lot of extension to create some sort of an integrated development model where we are trying to rope in homestays and also capitalizing on their other skills like handicrafts and woodwork and things like that. So far we have developed about 15 homestays. When I said develop, it means that we have identified them. We have gone into detail about speaking to each and every household, shortlisting them, selecting them, looking at different aspects. So it was a very lengthy process of shortlisting, and first of all, because you have to look at their interest as well, whether they want to do this or not, and whether they're able to do it or not, and the infrastructure that they have, and then also helping them up with setting up the space and different guidelines that we have created over time about how homestay should be managed. So that's our training we do. So now they're fully ready to host travelers, and every year, besides doing these workshops, a lot of individual travelers, solo travelers, they also visit the village and spend a couple of days here in homestays. So that's one of the extensions that we have done. And also at the same time, we also feel that through these sort of engagement, there's a lot of exposure for the local youth also. And also the participants or the travelers as an outsider who come here, because the outsiders who come here come with very specific skill sets, like somebody's a photographer, somebody's an architect or a researcher, or somebody's an artist. So the local youth gets exposed to these sort of skill sets which they are otherwise not. And the outsiders, the participants who come, they get a very unique perspective of the culture of the place, and through that conversation, most of the ideas which are there end up becoming more locally relevant and feasible. So it's a good two-way sort of learning experience. And the third thing that we have, which we have worked on is, of course, with the handicrafts and self-help groups. There's a local women's self-help group which are now making products, and they're selling that in the museum space, and also now their products are being sold outside UNESCO, in Leh and Kargil, which we help them out with. So there's an aspect of direct livelihood generation through homestays and engaging local craftsmen like masons and carpenters and things like that. And then there's an aspect of indirect benefits also, which this sort of engagement brings in, because when you do programs like this, we invite a lot of these local government or politicians and things like that. And these people in these villages, while you go with a certain idea of your own that oh, I want to do this, I want to help them with setting up a museum and they can make money like this, but they also have some real issues of their own in the village, with water and electricity and roads and things like that. So through these engagements, what happens is that these politicians, they end up coming to this village, and some of that work also ends up happening for them, and that plays a big role in building rapport and trust among the community, because a lot of this work has remained pending in many villages, and with this sort of engagement, this sort of work gets speeded up. So that's also an indirect benefit that happens. And another thing that another impact or the outcome of the project is documentation of the oral history and folklore over the past years, what we have done in the form of audio and sketches and storybooks and things like that. So that's something which we have now put on paper in one way. We have not in terms of intervention architecturally, because we don't have that technical background, we tend to not do a lot of physical intervention in these structures, because obviously these have a lot of heritage value to it. So without much knowledge of the technical aspects of it, we don't delve into it. But what we have done is that we have engaged people to do measure drawings of these heritage sites. So the fort and the Lumpur house, we have sort of a blueprint on paper. We have the complete measure drawings and photographs and videos of the place, which can be used further for more research, or if at some point tomorrow, if somebody plans to do some restoration work or conservation work, that can be used as a base. So that sort of documentation we have done. And lastly, I think through this project, we have managed to build a good network of patrons around India and abroad for the project. So people who necessarily don't support financially, but they act as ambassadors and promote the project, which indirectly brings in any other benefit. So if, just to give you an example, a couple of kids from the village have now got sponsorship for education. So a lot of people are now have adopted these kids for education, so they pay for their school fees and books and uniforms and things like that, and which happens through us. And we help them with the money, and arranging all the stuff and things like that, and how the money is being sent. So we are basically the middleman for them. So this is something that the direct and indirect benefits and the outcome of the project that has happened us. And then last, coming to the challenges and learning. So I guess it is very important to obviously set up and contextualize the destination of HUNDURMAN, because sorry, because the larger region that we operate in, each has different challenges, and there are projects attempt to address. So HUNDURMAN has its own set of challenges. This particular village, as I mentioned before, struggles with two main challenges. One is lack of livelihood sources within the village itself, and then there's a lack of connect, or there's a loss of knowledge of their history and heritage and oral folklore and cultural practices and things like that. So these both challenges are interlinked, which is why projects like ours, where the solution is an integrated sort of interlinked approach to address both issues, are very important. So through documentation and preservation of cultural heritage, we are not only retaining the knowledge in the younger generation, but also creating livelihood opportunities within the village ecosystem itself. And as Kargil district itself, in the larger context, it's this association with the war has always remained. So most travelers are hesitant to travel to Kargil, and they don't know where to stay. They don't know what else to do here. So this lack of education, sensitization, I mean, through projects like these, there's a lot of education and sensitization that also happens when people visit, and then they go out, and then that sort of knowledge is then transferred, and people are then more aware of the place. And then within the project, I think one of the major challenges that we have faced, or the learnings that we have, is around building trust, among the community, because projects like these, if you don't have any rapport or trust within the community, it can really make or break the project, because we have experienced that in the past. So you have to be very careful, and while you're going out in the field and talking to the community, a lot of times what happens is that we feel like we know better, and we tend to tell them what they need or what they should do, and a lot of times you end up trusting the wrong people. And these are practical things, that issues that happen while on field. You end up identifying wrong human resource, and which leads to a lot of distrust in the family. So our first focus has always been on identifying the right resource person in the village and spending enough time with them, and then trying to build trust, and then moving on to actually doing research, and then figuring out what we need to do. So this is from a project perspective, this is one of the major challenges. I guess that's relevant to any community-based project, not just in the mountains here, or it could be anywhere in the world. So I think that's very relevant. But contextual to here in these mountains, obviously, the terrain is very harsh, and the weather conditions are also very unpredictable. So that's another challenge, because when you bring in people from outside or lower altitudes, you also have to be very, very careful about orienting them and conditioning them to the altitude and terrain. Uh, and then again, the infrastructural challenge. That's I think lastly the infrastructural challenge, because of the remoteness of the place. We are place like Henasco, there's no internet, there's electricity is not reliable, and we don't get everything that we need here in this market. So that's if we have to source something, we have to source it from Delhi or Bombay. And if we need something which is very, very specific or technical, it is not available in Kargil. So these are the challenges and constraints that we have to work around out here. But we are hopeful that this year, I mean, we have not been able to do, we had planned 2 workshops this year, but hopefully by next year we are planning to conduct further workshops and other curated tours, where we are actually now looking at doing tangible restoration work to the Henasco fort. So that's something that we have in the pipeline, which we are working with some conservation architects, and we have built a team now. We are working on a proposal for the government. So that's next for us. And I think that's it from my side, guys. Thank you so much. I hope it was not very boring. Monique, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Muzzamil. It was a very nice insight as to what Roots Ladakh is actually doing in Kargil and giving the power back to the people. So now we can ask all the participants to turn on the video so that the session can be a bit more interactive and the
Should I stop the screen share?
Yes, Muzzamil, you can stop the screen.
yeah, you can stop your screen share there. I would request everyone once again to turn on their video so that the session can begin. Now we can take up a few questions or anything that anyone wants to speak. You can raise your hand so I can unmute. No, actually, Vedant, you will have to unmute the person.
You can also type anything you want on the chat box and we can take it up from there.
So, Muzzamil, a question from my side. So, how has the village responded? So, as in terms of, has the village participated? So, has the youth participated actively in the processes that you have gone through in the village? Or
Yes. Okay. So in terms of participation, in Hinasco, we have from the community itself, we have fortunately great support, both, and most of our local resource people in Hinasco are actually the women who are there, because most of the men don't really live in the village as such, and obviously the young boys and girls, they're either studying in school or colleges which are outside Hinasco. So most of the work, so all the homestay work and all the work with the self-help group, these are all women-led initiatives. And the youth or the local youth of the village, we try to bring them in when we are specifically doing these kind of workshops. Like I said, because it's a good learning experience for both, and B, we also need a lot of human resource on ground to execute a project like this of this scale in just 7 days. because as you can see, it's like we're kind of reverse engineering it. Like, we set the date first, and then we say, okay, on this date we have to do this. So we have that just 7 days of window. So we need a lot of hands on deck. Fortunately, there's been really good response from the local youth, and we have been working with the same people since the last 3 years, and every year more people sort of keep joining. So yeah, in terms of participation, we've been very fortunate in Hinasco as compared to Hundarman, where we had a very different experience.
Also, how has the migration affected the project? Like, has it affected greatly, or means is Anasco as a village been affected a lot by migration?
Yeah, so migration basically is obviously not by choice, right? It's because they have no choice. Uh, so the younger people obviously are not really into doing farming, and they're not into grazing livestock, which they are traditionally supposed to do, or what they do, not supposed to do, what they do traditionally. So most of the older folk, the older women, older men, and the women end up staying back in the village. So our objective has been to create some sort of livelihood for them, and with the local or the youth and the new generation with them. Our objective is to bring them, closer to their culture and heritage, which they're sort of losing touch with over time. So I don't know, in the larger scheme of things, I mean, I don't know if eventually they will come back to Hinasco and start living there. Obviously, I think before this presentation and a couple of days back when we were talking about how does this affect migration, and probably tourism is not the answer to this thing, to help people come back to their village. Tourism is something, I think it's a very unstable industry, especially for a place like Ladakh, because it has a very fragile ecosystem, and anything that happens naturally or man-made really disrupts the industry, so it's not really sustainable. Today there's a pandemic, then there's a problem at the China border, and then there's a problem in Kashmir, and suddenly there's an earthquake. So these are factors that really affect the industry directly. So probably tourism is not the answer. I think the answer is to maybe go back to the old ways of living, where people used to do a lot of farming. So I'm not saying they need to go back into the mountains and raise goats, but there are newer technologies in the agricultural industry also, and farming industry also, which can fetch a lot of income for them, create a lot of livelihood also, and it's a sustainable line of work, I feel, in with the ecosystem of Ladakh that we live in. Yeah.
Now we
So
can
we
take up a
probably won't
question
bring
from
that.
Samvid. Yeah. Now we can take up a question from Samvid. Vedanti, if you can unmute Samvid, he can ask the question directly.
Hey, hi. First of all, I mean, I was really happy to see whatever you had to present. I just had like a basic question about how you start going about things, right? So how do you break the ice with these people? How do you maintain transparency with them? Because like there's an age-old narrative about how as an outsider, when you go to a new space, and you obviously are an outsider, right? And like, it's almost like, who are you to come and tell me how to live my life? Or who are you to tell me how to come and live a certain thing in a certain way, right? So how do you break that ice? I mean, how do you explain to them saying that, okay, fine, this might just be beneficial for you in the long term? Because it's also an experiment, right? Sometimes it might or might not work. So
Yeah.
I just want to understand, how does that end up happening?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, and I'm not sure if I have the right answer for that, because even we are struggling with that very question. This happened in our past project in Hundarman, where we were not able to build enough trust, maybe because we were not transparent enough in the community, and we had some issues with the community there, where they did not really, majority of them did not agree with the kind of work that we were doing there, and we were not able to take them in confidence. So in Hinasco, what we tried to do was, obviously, we like I said, it becomes very, very important to identify that one person or one or two people within the community who can be your ambassadors, or somebody who understands what you're trying to say. And at the same time, when you are talking to them, obviously you tell them, you don't tell them what you want to do, but you break the ice by uh, empathizing with them, like how you typically go about doing research,
Yep.
and you talk to them and try and understand their perspective first, and not like impose ideas in the beginning. So that's one of the biggest mistakes that we did in Hundarman, that we tried to tell them in the beginning that you should do this, and the trust will only come when the person that you identified, you turn that person into some sort of a role model, I feel. And if you engage that person in some way and you incentivize that person, like for example, we started with just 2 homestays. Okay, like we, before starting the homestays, we went to each and every household, like physically we went to about 110 houses which are there, and we spoke to them and we told them, this is something that you can do, and this is how you tourists can come and this is how you can make money, whether you want to do it or not. Initially a lot of people are against the idea. Some people say they want to do it, but some people are just waiting, somebody else will do it first, then I'll see. Like it's like how in technology you have early adopters and then you have
Yep.
late
Yep.
adopters. So
Yep.
once you have those people identified and those people are incentivized, for example, you have those 2 homestays and you start bringing in some people and they start making money, and then the others start realizing, oh, okay, this is working, this is something that I can trust. And then, so over time, we have managed to do 15 homestays. We
So they
started with
become
just 2.
evangelists for you in some sense. The early adopters that you mentioned, I mean, the ones who
Yes, yes.
eventually see the benefit in your.
Because it's a typical human nature to not trust anybody, not trust any
Of course.
outsider. So once your neighbor has started making money, then they talk freely amongst themselves. So then they sort of, when they also say ki, okay, this is something that is working, then probably they start out. But it's not a foolproof solution, because there's always you have a lot of local dynamics in villages within the community itself, like
Yeah. Yeah.
this neighbor is has a fight with that neighbor, but you don't know
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That one person who's like really been engaged with you, the entire community is against him, but you don't know that. By the time you have like spent so much energy and time on him, it's too late also, like so then you have to find a new person. So it's there's really not one straight path, I guess, to go. You have to, but the main thing is that you have to identify those people. You have to learn to identify those people and start incentivizing them,
Okay.
so that the others start trusting you.
In fact, there's this. I watched this film recently called Manthan by Shyam Benegal, and it talks about how Amul Cooperative actually had come to be, and
Right.
how people had actually, when they initially started off the program, they approached
Yeah.
the farmers and they explained what a cooperative was to them and how the money would directly come to their hand, and it would cut out the
Yeah.
middleman who's actually making a lot of money out of them and exploiting them in some sense.
Yeah.
It's actually a great film. I mean, I would recommend everybody to watch it. And it's India's first crowdfunded film as well, which was made by 5 lakh farmers, and every one of them gave 2 rupees for that film.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's actually quite amazing. You guys should probably have a look at it if you can.
Okay. Awesome. We'll watch that. Manthan.
Yes, it's called Manthan.
Okay.
You can probably write that in the chat box so everyone can get the name.
It's playing on movie right now. So.
Oh yeah, I didn't.
So the next question is from Anupriya. So we can unmute Anupriya and she can ask the question directly.
Hi, Muzzamil. Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm from Seva Bharat, and I'm actually anchoring a project that's developing homestays here in Uttarakhand. So just 2 questions. One is, as you see this post, the COVID situation as such is coming together, and tourism being this industry that's largely hit. How do you see the industry coming back? And the second part is, I know it's a wider question, but just like go for it. The second part is that as the industry slowly starts kicking in, do you see the impact of mass tourism setting in, or do you see the window is like widening up for community-based tourism initiatives as such? But yeah, it would be great to kind of get your thoughts on these 2 questions.
See, I mean, I'm sure you have also read all those articles which are coming out saying that, now is the time for alternative tourism, and because people are going to look for remoter destinations, and, I think homestays is the way to go and responsible tourism is the way to go. I mean, as my personal opinion is that while that sounds very nice and promising, it's still a niche, and I think even after COVID it will still remain a niche, because I think as humans, we have a tendency to forget things very fast. So once a vaccine is there, people will start doing the mass tourism thing again. People will start traveling again. Even today when Ladakh is shut, I saw some bikers from Delhi yesterday. So people, mass tourism thing is not going to go away. That is going to come. But yes, I think it's a good opportunity for people in the responsible tourism space to use this window of COVID. I don't know if that, I don't know, because there are a lot of ethical questions around it. Outsiders coming to villages and they bringing COVID into a village where it was not there. So as operators, we are also right now very cautious about promoting anything at the moment. But there might be a possibility that, more some people, because I think people will eventually in the beginning, when they are able to travel, I think they will choose like closer destinations and more remote destinations, which is true. So I think that window is an opportunity for us to or people who are operating in that responsible tourism space, uh, to earn some profits, or give some benefits to the communities. But I think eventually it will come back to the same. That's my feeling. I don't think that responsible tourism will become the future because of COVID. I mean, it's just a very candid opinion of mine. uh, I know it's very pessimistic of me to say that, but I think that's how it's
Not at
been.
all.
That's how it's been.
Yeah.
And we have also always have to, like, being working in this responsible tourism space. We have always have to, I think, keep thinking of new and innovative travel experiences for people. So you just basically keep targeting the niche that you have. I don't really see this becoming a big thing because of COVID.
Sure. Sorry, I have one more question. Can I go ahead?
Yeah.
Or, all right,
Yeah,
sorry.
please.
So the other thing that I'm coming across is, I'm sure you must have also come across, is these online experiences that is trending with Airbnb.
Yeah.
So basically, like, so we tried for an attempted to do that, but as you must have already known, coming from the hills, infrastructure is a major problem, and connectivity is also a major issue. But I feel like that is still kind of like a scope that we could kind of look into, especially during this pandemic as such, because then offering like a live authentic experiences from these villages or rural areas is something that maybe kind of like build on. Do you think that were you able to kind of explore a similar experiences there in the dark or so? It's not a question, but I think it's a more of like a thought sharing.
Online? You mean like an online tour?
Yeah, an online experience or a virtual tour experiences.
Yeah, sounds like an interesting idea, because the other day also this friend of mine, she was doing this online virtual heritage walk of
Okay.
something in Calcutta with her dad. So
Mhm.
it's sounds like people are signing up for this. I mean, I don't know. I'm For a place like Ladakh, I don't know something like this is possible, because you need that sort of technology, and you need the expertise. We have the expertise, I guess, but the technology is probably not very strong if you want to do like a village experience tour. As such, this I think this one in Calcutta was a tour of an old city, I think.
Mhm.
So maybe like a Leh Old Town virtual tour is probably possible, but sounds like an interesting idea. The other idea I thought which was pretty interesting was, but it has its risks, was this work from mountains
Yeah,
thing,
I was.
which is around nowadays. Um,
Yeah.
which we had thought of something called work from hills, like work from home ka we made work from hills. But we were just talking about it in office the other day, and then I saw an ad on Facebook, not an ad, but somebody had posted from Himachal saying that they work from mountains, and they have shown this really fancy bungalow, and stay here
Yeah.
for a month, and which I think has a lot of potential. Uh,
Mm.
given the, you have like proper protocols of people who are coming in, and how they are staying, and I think not less than 1 month, and obviously you need good internet connectivity for something like this, but I think this is a great idea on paper at least.
Cool. Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
The next question is from Tanu.
Hi. So I just want to start by saying that I loved the work that you've done till now, because you're in a way restoring our culture, and I think that's so important. And I've been reading a lot about it. So I just wanted to ask you something that you spoke about sometime before. Have you ever unknowingly offended people, the local people there, because your ideas and concepts were a little unconventional and something?
I lost the audio.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now you're back.
Yeah, so I was just asking you if you've ever unknowingly offended the local people there because your ideas were a little unconventional and something that they haven't heard of before. So like, how do they, do they take it well, or do they, they're like, why are you coming to our area and trying to teach us?
Okay. I mean, I don't recall any particular incident as such, but generally people here are, very humble, and they don't really like to confront so much. So even if probably we have offended somebody, they probably would not have confronted us. But then again, like, you have to be obviously sensitive about a lot of
Yeah.
things, when it comes to religion, or when it comes to like even a lot of gender biases. So these are things you have to obviously keep in mind depending on the context of where you are. Even if in Ladakh or any other part of the world, I think that cultural context is something that you have to do your homework before going to the village and see what is relevant and what is not, and what you're supposed to say and what you're not supposed to say. Definitely. But here in Ladakh, I mean, even if I have, probably they didn't, but I must have. I don't know. Maybe. But in Hundarman, actually, we ended up pissing off a lot of locals, because we failed to bring them on board in the beginning, because we assumed that because we are doing something nice for them, everybody should agree, or everybody should like our idea, or everybody should like us. But that's not the case. The truth is that if there are 10 people supporting you, there will be another 5 or 10 who are against the idea, or who don't agree with you, not necessarily because they don't like you, because they just don't know what's happening. You are going in their place and you are doing something, but they're just not in the loop, like,
Yeah.
so it's obviously like, it's kind of human nature. So that's where you, I guess, have to be careful from
Okay,
the
thank
beginning.
you.
Yeah.
I think there's one more question from Rixen. He's asking, can you explain a bit more about the virtual tour Ladakh, if you can?
And
I'll actually
that was a
unmute
bit.
him. I'll unmute him, Vedanti, if you can. I think he is not there. We can take the next question from Vedanti.
Thanks, Muzzamil, for the presentation. So I actually had a question about, since you've been working with heritage conservation to some extent in the local area, have you come
Yeah.
across like issues with the vernacular construction techniques that are currently being practiced in the area, which require maybe certain amount of professional intervention in terms of building, let's say, to make it more resilient or to switch over to different types of materials?
Yeah.
Has that been also a question, and have there been any kind of you know other materials which are cropping up, like let's say concrete and steel or any such things happening around in that area in Hundarman?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, across Ladakh, whether it's Leh or Kargil, most of the new construction that is happening obviously happens with concrete and your steel or whatever. Mainly because it is easily available in the market as compared to now traditional materials, like good quality soil, adobe bricks, which are not readily available in the market. Then all the wooden logs and beams that you require for traditional work, even stone masonry, the kind of labor that you require for this sort of vernacular architecture is also becoming less and less over time. We don't have a lot of labor. So today, most of the construction work in Ladakh is done by non-local masons. The carpenters are non-local, the masons are non-local, the plumbers or whatever. All the skilled labor that you require to do a construction happens by non-local. So obviously, people are slowly moving towards that sort of technique of this construction. Because it is easily available, and second, it is faster. Because here our season for construction of the summer season is very short. So we just have 6 to 7 months in the year to do whatever construction work needs to be done. After that, it's just too cold to do any work. So it's faster. And also, I think another reason why this is happening is because uh, I guess people are generally the people who are constructing generally don't have knowledge of traditional or vernacular style of architecture. To be honest, they don't know how to do it because there has not been any transition of knowledge. And also, a lot of people now migrate in the winter, so they don't really plan a house or a building keeping in mind winters. Traditionally we used to make houses keeping in mind the winter because the houses need to be warm. So that's why stone, that's why clay, that's why smaller windows to retain heat inside in the winter. So that is changing. A lot of people now go to Delhi, Jammu, or warmer places to stay in the winter with their families. So very less people stay back. So I think these are some of the reasons why people are switching to that. So now if tomorrow I want to do something in vernacular architecture, if I want to build a house even for myself, it's very difficult for me to find the human resource. It's expensive, it's time consuming. It's very difficult to find material also. Again, it's expensive and time consuming. So I guess these are the reasons why people are now switching. And in our projects, honestly, like I said before, we haven't really done any structural intervention in these buildings because we don't have that expertise. We don't have structural engineers, and we don't have people who are experts in conservation architecture as such in our team. But we are now planning to do that. But for that, we are building a special team of people and experts who know the technical aspects of it, and somebody people who can help us guide how to do this. Because obviously in architecture, then you have a lot of conservation, you have a lot of ethical questions that you have to answer. Painting a simple wall also becomes a question of ethics. कि इसको white paint करें कि red करें कि इसको छोड़ दें. So these are things that we have to be very careful about. We haven't really touched on structural intervention yet. Yeah, I hope that was that answer.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Now we can take the last two questions. So one is from Pragnya, and the last one is from Samir. So we can start with Pragnya, and then.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah.
Hi.
So first, I want to say that you're doing really exceptional work, and I really appreciate you trying to bring back or give more awareness to heritage, which is already known by a lot of people, by the locals and not by the outsiders. So I just wanted to know whether you have ever faced like some kind of challenges trying to explain to the locals whether like how to preserve their kind of heritage and how to showcase it to the outside world, or because a lot of people they want to go towards the modern way of thinking and forgetting their heritage and their roots. So have you ever faced such kind of challenges explaining to the locals that it is actually good to stay within your roots and not just drift away from them?
True, actually, that's a really good question, and that's definitely a challenge. I'll tell you one example. Being from Ladakh or being from a place like this, generally, like people here, I think some have some sort of like a inferiority complex. When they look at outsiders or the modern world, so to speak, or a English commode, So these are things that locals are like a little bit wary of. And when then they look at an English commode and then they look at a local Ladakhi toilet, they're ashamed of it, because they think that ki wo kya sochenge bahar wale, like these outsiders come and look at a house. But what we realized over time, even in Hundarman, when we were out on field in Henasco, and when we started talking to people, and when the outsiders started showing interest in those really obscure objects in a house, like somebody has a broken wooden spindle which his grandmother used to use, that was lying somewhere, and the outsider asked for it and very curiously asking questions about it, and so that I think helped in bringing back that sense of pride in their culture, because nobody really told them, right, that this is something that outsiders appreciate, and this is when somebody from outside appreciates it, then you feel like, okay, yeah, this has some value to it. And literally over the course of 7 days, villagers started bringing these like random objects to us, because they thought that people are seeing value in this, like they're like, क्या है ये, हम तो ये ऐसे ही पड़ा हुआ है, like we don't even need this. But these people came, they started researching on it, they started sketching it, they started figuring out how to use it, and like all those things, when they started happening, and when then you actually took it and put it as an exhibit in some sort of a display, then you feel like, okay, वो sense of pride आ जाता है. So I think that sense of pride is very important to instill, and that's how you sort of bring back. And obviously, once you start incentivizing, because incentivization, I think, is one of the key aspects of community engagement, not necessarily through money, but other means also, in kind also, you can help in other ways also. So that really helps building that trust and, gaining confidence in your own roots and heritage, I think. That's our own personal experience.
That's nice.
Yeah.
It's like something that my mother used to tell me once about our, family people who live in the village. They come and they see all these big, big malls and they feel so fascinated by it when they come to a city.
Yeah.
But when we go to a village and we see all their, small abodes and their comfortable living and all their farmlands, and we feel so enthusiastic seeing that. And they just think it's nothing, it's like it's some like garbage lying on the road for them, but we find value in that. So that's how we can really appreciate their work and give them more pride to feel good about their roots as well.
It's all about empathy, actually. You basically like go in with zero preconceived notions, and you try and empathize as much as possible. It's easier said than done.
Yeah.
But once you start empathizing, then you really start understanding that their perspective.
Yeah.
And that only comes with time, actually, in practice.
Right. That's
Yeah.
nice. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, the community interventions are the most required thing in India today. And also, they are the most toughest thing in India today.
Yeah.
Goes hand in hand. We can take the final question from Samir Gurjar, if he is there. Yeah, he's there. Vedanti, you can unmute.
Yeah, hi. I'm Samir from Ahmedabad. I just had one question. As you were talking about the importance of farming and the next generation not staying over there for the work, are there any plans or any thoughts which you've given for creating greenhouses? I hope you know what greenhouses are. Greenhouses are small piece of land which are attached to each house, and there's what you call a tadpatri over that, and that keeps a lot of heat, and they can also do farming even in the winters, and that also helps in their livelihood as well as earn some money out of that. And more so, the summer season is very less, 4-5 months only. Any thoughts on that?
So we have actually helped, so the state government and the local administration here on the horticulture department, agriculture department, they have a lot of subsidy schemes and incentive schemes for rural communities to help them set up these sort of greenhouses. So we help them get these benefits, but we are not directly engaged in farming with them or teaching them different techniques of farming, because that's something which we don't really know. But I think obviously they know better than us how to do it. But we haven't really, to be honest, we haven't really done much in that space, but we have definitely helped people, people who have shown interest. So a lot of times what we do is like we help them connect with different government schemes or expose them to different government schemes which they can benefit from. So this was at one instance a scheme where they were getting subsidized greenhouse solar houses, which means they get the plastic and the frame and things like that at a very subsidized rate. So we have helped people to do that. But as a source of livelihood, I am not sure if they can do really progressive farming in that, because the investment is very high for them in this.
Okay.
And most of the people in the villages, like I said, are like older people, and you know, the women who are already doing a lot of other work. So unless somebody actually decides to come back and do take up a bigger piece of land and do a more progressive farming there, I'm not sure if this can become like a really income generating thing, because what they grow now is what they eat. There's very less that they sell out in the market. But yeah, not to say that this is not a bad idea. This is really a good idea. I think that's something which we can really look into, which we can
Because
maybe
biggest
next year
advantage over there is the sun, which is available
yeah,
all 12 months.
yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, there are people who are now really going into progressive farming here in Ladakh, not at a very big scale. It is started by the DRDO. The army is doing, the Indian Army is doing a lot of, because, you know, the biggest market, of course, is the Indian Army here. And biggest employer also, in fact, is the Indian Army. So because of so much of presence of the forces here, they need a lot of, you know, they need supplies of fresh vegetables and fresh fruits and things like that, which right now comes from outside Ladakh. So there is a big opportunity if you can actually build a network of these different village communities where they're growing fruits and vegetables locally, and that can come and, you know, it's supplied to the army through some sort of a supply chain. There's a real opportunity here for sure. But yeah, somebody needs to work on that.
Yeah. So I had experienced this in Spiti Valley, where I had gone in the winters. So a lot of individual outsiders had started sponsoring each house for creating greenhouses. So maybe that concept, if you can get some people who are interested, maybe that can be useful.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Actually, we can we'll definitely think about that. We can do that because there are people already, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of people who have visited the place have started sponsoring education for the local children, you know, for the needy people who are not able to sustain education for their children. So there are people out there who probably would be willing to do this. So for sure, yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you.
Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Muzzamil, for the presentation. We got lovely insights about Leh and Kargil. It was very nice to know about Roots Ladakh. It is also good to connect to such young firms who are into the similar fields of community participation and engagement.
Thank you. I hope you guys enjoyed. It wasn't very boring, the conversation, the presentation.
It's fine. So, we can just share your mail ID if anyone wants to ask you any questions separately. They can just mail you on the Roots Wala mail ID. So we can just send that mail ID to everyone and they can be in touch with you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Muzzamil.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.